What's up, guys? It's your boy James, aka 68J, coming to you on this Monday. And I'm super excited as I have a phenomenal guest, a legend in the game, someone who is tremendously respected. Before I actually introduce this gentleman, let me go through a few of the things that he's done. Jimmy E. Valle, founding partner and managing director of Valhil Capital and Valhil Advisors, co-founder of Honeycomb Q, co-founder and chairman of Delta Wave Energy and publisher Astrolite Media. Prior to founding Valhil Capital, Valle enjoyed more than 2 decades as a partner in 3 global AM Law 100 law firms, advising public and private companies, master limited partnerships, MLPs, investment banking firms, sovereign wealth, and private equity funds. Is more than 100 billion of worldwide M&A transactions and securities offerings, including OGE Energy Corp in its 11 billion midstream merger with Central Point Energy, Continental Airlines. My goodness, this is amazing. In its 8.5 billion all stock public to public merger of equals with United Airlines and Micron Technologies, 5.2 billion NAND flash joint venture with Intel. Mr. Valle holds a Bachelor of Science, summa cum laude, is that how you said Culati? Lamar University and Juris Doctorate. I mean, this guy is absolutely brilliant. A Juris Doctorate, let's see, we have Texas Tech University School, Law Texas Tech University School, an Associate Audio Engineering Full Sail Center for Recordings Artists. Mr. Jimmy Valle is also the former chairman of St. Francis. How do you say that? How do you say that word? Episcopal. Episcopal School, Houston. The board treasurer, Academy of Finance, SBISD, Houston, and presently serves on the board of directors for several Valhil portfolio companies, including Honeycomb Q, Nave X1, Global Commodities, Astrolite Media, and Delta Wave Energy. If that's not saying enough, I'm a huge fan of Jimmy's. I've been following him for a while. If you guys know anything about the Valhil Capital, the valuation, it was something that had the market in an up story, and it just really gave you guys an overview of just how a lot of us have undervalued this amazing asset. And what Ripple is doing as a company. So I'm really excited to be here. It's an honor for me. One of my favorite people in the space. If there was any type of term like cryptologist and master master in this game, I would label that Jimmy Valle. Jimmy, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, James. Good to be here with you, man. Thank you for that introduction. I don't know how many shades of red I'm turning, but I really appreciate it.
Hey, you know what? You definitely deserve it. I've been following you for a while, and we appreciate everything that you're doing for the space, being one of the pioneers is leading the way. The way I'm actually going to kick this off, because I told you before, typically I blast this out on social media. So I just want to know, who is Jimmy Valle, besides all the incredible things that I just read off? Who is Jimmy Valle, and what did you do prior to crypto, if you don't mind?
Yeah, not at all. So I'll try to encapsulate the last, call it 35 years briefly. But, you know, when I was coming out of high school, I was a rock and roll guy. I was a musician.
Okay.
And thought that my destiny was to be a rock star. So naturally, I went to a recording arts school and got that associate's degree. Went out to LA for about 4 years, where I was recording music, and I did a lot of post-production for films, had a sound effects business with some guys. But I was there in Los Angeles during probably the most apocalyptic time to live there. So I lived there through the riots.
Oh, wow.
The Northridge earthquake hit, Malibu burnt to the ground. Then when the spring rains came, the mudslides and all that stuff. So by the time, I was early 20s, I was like, get me the hell out of here. There's something that my boy isn't sitting right, So I went to Nashville for about a year doing the singer-songwriter thing, and then ultimately moved back to Texas, where I enrolled at a college that's in my hometown, Beaumont, Texas, called Lamar University. Turns out I had this aptitude for business. Who knew? Kind of became, really majored in business with kind of a pre-law, and then minored in accounting. But accounting and finance and all that was kind of very much part of what I got interested in during that time. So I started learning about investment banking, corporate law. Ended up, I would have gone investment banking and done probably exactly what I did on the law side, but I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Texas Tech. So I figured you'd be an idiot not to go get a free legal education. So I went off and did that.
Right.
And then came back to Houston in the kind of, right before Enron failed in 2001. So things kind of went into disarray a little bit in the energy markets. But then I was there when the shale revolution started to occur and manifest in America.
Right.
And so all the papers, on my desk went through the roof. I, didn't see my family for about 12 years. And when I looked up, I had, done all these amazing deals and stuff like that. And that really carried me. I was at Jones Day for most of my career, made partner Jones Day. It's a mega, global international law firm, really a name, in corporate law.
Okay.
Great M&A practice. I was privileged to grow up there and learn there. Went to Paul Hastings in Houston, which is another international law firm, really heavy in private equity and finance. Kind of took my energy M&A practice there, did a bunch of public to public deals in the master limited partnership space and stuff like that. And then finished out my career at a firm called Winston and Strawn, which is another international law firm out of Chicago. And that kind of happened during the pandemic. I was turning 50 that year. And, I had been, because of what I did for a living, and the stewarding and arranging a lot of very large financings in connection with M&A or securities offerings, I had a viewpoint into what was going on in the global economy and banking, and in particular, that probably not many people did.
Right.
So, there was deals were being more and more highly levered. People were sourcing debt in all sorts of different jurisdictions and then kind of rolling it up, calling it equity. So, it was kind of a head scratching type of thing. And then when the pandemic hit, you could really say, like all of us, we had time to sit back and not just be grinding in our day job all day, but think about things. And
that's right.
What does this mean? So it was during that time. I know you've been in crypto digital assets since 2017.
Yes, sir.
I was the guy in 2017 who would have been like, "What the hell are you doing? Like this
Right.
magic internet money? You're like actually putting real money in that?"
Right.
And actually had that conversation with a few of my clients who were major executives of these companies and stuff. And but it was during that time, of course, read the Satoshi white paper, started doing a ton of diligence, and I just I had that eureka moment that kind of everything we were going through and the slowdown of the system based on the debt and the acceleration of money printing out of the Fed, it was all a more coordinated thing.
Right.
So it's basically switch us into a truly digital financial system.
Absolutely.
And that was a pretty profound moment for me. So we already had Valhil Capital, but it was more kind of a passive thing I did on the side.
Right.
We had that since 2005. Actually, we did our first real acquisition of a company. We bought a concrete business in Houston back in 2016. But it had been things that we were invested. We're an LP in several real estate funds and stuff like that. Very traditional kind of passive investment. But since I was turning 50 later that year in 2020, and everything was changing, it just seemed like God had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is time for you to kind of do something more as a principal and a driver of these types of deals."
Right.
That's led me pretty quickly to XRP and all the ISO compliant tokens type stuff. But XRP in particular, after working with Bitcoin and then a little bit of Ethereum, these were very slow, clunky transactions. We got to do due diligence on a lot of the public company Bitcoin miners. I've visited some of the largest Bitcoin mining facilities in the world.
Wow.
Most of which are in Texas. If people are in Bitcoin and have not done that, I highly recommend they do that.
Right.
There's nothing like putting your eyeballs on these, walls and walls of miners that are 30 feet in the air and 100 to 150 yards, down a corridor, and there's 8 or 9 of these things. It really puts it in perspective. But it was clear Bitcoin could not become the global solution for underpinning the financial system.
Right.
And when you kind of start to go down the XRP path, pretty clear that it can. It's the $6 million. You're roughly my age, it looks like. So you remember the $6 million man?
Oh man, one of my favorite shows. Shows. Yeah.
We can rebuild him better, faster,
right.
stronger.
That's right.
So I've always called XRP as the $6 million man of digital assets, right?
Yeah.
Better, faster, stronger, more environmentally efficient.
Yeah.
Transaction costs of less than a fraction of a penny.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a lot to like.
Yeah. Steve Austin. I remember that like it was yesterday. Steve Austin. Gosh. I mean, one of my. I had the doll, so I know everything about it.
I did as well.
Yeah,
pull it back.
Yeah. I tell you, it brings just kind of dates us a little bit, but that's okay. And then they actually did a spinoff of the $6 million woman or something like that. I think at some point.
The Bionic Woman.
Bionic Woman. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, no, our stories are similar in some ways. And I remember the first time I was introduced to digital assets. A friend of mine. Well, the truth is, I was looking for something different as well. I've done so many things in business. I shared some of my background with you, and a lot of that, especially with traveling the world, being on some of the biggest stages around the world. The issue was that I missed a lot of things. I missed homecoming queen for my kids. I missed presidential awards. I missed anniversaries. I missed, we're going to go to a concert, and then I would miss it because I'd be called out to South America, whatever it was. So for me, after raising our kids, I wanted to make sure that I was able to find something that I can do at home with my wife, that kind of thing. And it just so happens, like you said, it was really God sent, because what happened is I got a phone call from a guy who's like a Tony Robbins of the industry. And I respect him so much. And he was like a mentor in my journey of being a global speaker. And he said, I know, hey, James, I know a guy. I want to tell you a story. He used to drive cabs back in the day, and he made $100 million with this thing called Bitcoin. And if it would have been anybody else, Jimmy, I would have probably hung up the phone, because that just doesn't sound right. I mean, we come from a day where a farmer worked really hard, 20 years and maybe make $6 million. I mean, to say that someone did $100 million in that short period of time, but I respected the guy. He said, I'm gonna get this guy on the phone tomorrow. Would you be open? I said, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because of who he was. And then I really quickly had a panic attack because I realized that I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. So I started calling up all these people. I found about 4 or 5 of my friends, I believe it was 5 friends, from doctors to $1 million investors who knew about Bitcoin. And I was shocked. I was like, why didn't you guys tell me? So I did a little bit of homework on the internet. So when he called, I was ready. Puts this guy on the phone, starts talking to me. His name is Ramin out of Canada. And I'm sorry, he was out of Canada, but at the time they flew me to, was it Italy? And he said, or I'm sorry, was it Spain? And he goes, what do you know? I said, I made some phone calls. I know a little bit. I said, I just reached out to about 4 or 5 of my friends. He said, I'll tell you what, first class tickets on their way. All you guys come. I said, what? So we jumped on this plane. We went out there. My wife is in the chat. She'll tell you it was the craziest thing ever. And I sat down with this guy, and I literally had an out of body experience. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I could think at that moment is, oh my God, I missed this. And that's literally what I felt. I felt instant regret. Like, why didn't somebody that I know tell me about this thing? And so anyways, long story short, I got in, had some ups and downs. Obviously, it's a learning curve, especially, trying to, number one, have a plan, strategic plan. Number 2, doing my own research, because the internet's just so full of nonsense. You got to be able to weed through that. Number 3 was controlling my emotions, which I found out very quickly is one of the biggest, obstacles, the biggest challenges that we have as investors. And then 4, learn how to take profits, because sometimes we end up leaving a whole lot of money on the table, being greedy, and then focusing on my why, which made me better at all those things. So it's been a phenomenal ride. Like I told you, been in since 17, started the show about 13 months ago, and we're just getting started. So really excited. So what I want to do is I want to shift going into one of the reasons that I see a lot of value in who you are, I became a big fan of who you are, because as I was coming up in business and as far as in the business world, a lot of people said, well, James, what's your secret? Like, how are you able to do all these different things? And I said, well, I didn't invent anything. I just followed what other successful people had done. And I would attach myself to people I could relate to. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, people like yourself or like Molly that's going to be coming on, and many others in the space on a very high level, is it really validates, especially for assets that I'm involved in, like XRP, and obviously I'm well diverse. But when I see someone like you that is beyond professional, beyond brilliant, and all the things that you've done, and I see that you have embraced this technology, embraced this asset, and there's nothing about you that doesn't make me believe that you've done your due diligence and then some. You've been at some of the biggest mining facilities around the world. And when I read your evaluation, I said, this guy is brilliant. And so the reason I say that, because I think a lot of people need to understand the key to success and the key, in my opinion, to embracing this life-changing opportunity with crypto, opportunity that I believe allows the average person and the person who's not so average to dream again. Because so many times in life, we get detoured with responsibility, children, whatever the case may be, is to follow successful people, not the guy last year who might have been working at this job or making minimum wage, but this year all of a sudden he's an expert, and every time he says go buy Shikaka coin, which is just a coin I just made up, with 15 zeros, you go do that. I don't want to offend anyone, but let's say he says, hey, go get Shikaka coin, but what he's really doing is shilling and trying to pump his position. So many people will do that because they want to get rich quick. They're looking for microwavable results. They're looking for the lottery ticket. They're looking for the casino results, instead of understanding that this journey with Ripple and XRP is a marathon. And for so long, Jimmy, I got frustrated in this space trying to figure out why more people who seemed intelligent in this space didn't get it. And then I realized not everybody understands business. Not everybody understands the utility and what it was created for. So let's talk about, let's go to the very beginning here. Why crypto? What exactly attracted you to it? And why did that journey take you right into XRP? Was that the first thing that you saw?
No, Bitcoin was the first thing that I saw. So again, during the onset of the pandemic, I was one of these people who basically immediately thought something else was going on instead of what was happening.
Right.
And it was so dramatic, of what was happening that just the way my brain works, I immediately was skeptical and said, this is a front for something.
Right.
This is a look over here while we
let me find what's wrong with this thing.
Exactly. So it didn't take me long to realize that there were a lot of things happening. There was the BRICS alliance, and I know we're going to talk about this, but the BRICS alliance was happening and pushing towards a multipolar world. Because of the sanctions with Russia and China, the SWIFT system, that they had a very strong desire to move out of using the dollar as the world reserve currency. There was it's like all these things were kind of happening at the same time, but weren't quite coming together and harmonizing. But I could see that they would one day. That the value of precious metals, central banks were hoarding precious metals, specifically gold. So there was going to probably need to be a reprice in gold as well. And then if you just, because you and I are both of the age that I lived through the creation and the development, the expansion of the internet, I drew a lot of parallels to, how that had occurred. When I mentioned I was back in LA, late 80s, early 90s, we had the internet back then and no one else did.
Right.
And so when I was back in Texas going to college in the late 90s and the internet boom happened, it was one of the big regrets, kind of like the way you thought you had missed it on crypto, right? I was like, oh my God, I was using this technology when no one knew what it was. And I wasn't sophisticated and savvy enough to have thrown myself into it like that opportunity. So I always have told myself, if I see another total paradigm shift like this happening, I'm going to jump all over it.
Right.
And that's what I saw with the digitalization of our financial system. Now I think that's in 2020, And most of the people that I would talk to that would be my peers or family members or people at the time, I mean, I would go and talk to them about this stuff and say, you know, we're going to change financial system. We're going to go back to a sound money system, probably a gold standard or commodities backed standard. And because we've got the technology, we're going to move it digitally. And there's this whole, you know, digital asset crypto sector that's already being plumbed all over the world.
Right.
And they would look at me like I was an alien. I mean, it was like, what the hell are you? Still to this day, some of them I still get the Olympic eye roll. I kind of don't even talk about it anymore. Right. Because if you don't see it by now, you're just never going to see it.
Yeah, that's right.
The thesis that we developed was initially a thesis of, okay, if we're going digital and we're going to have, you know, a sound money system and we're going to move it digitally, and maybe we true up physically every quarter, every year, or something like that. I'm talking like between central banks, between countries, that type of thing. Well, it needs to be the thing that is the most useful, right? And this is you know, and we'll probably get hammered for speaking so ill of Bitcoin, but you know, if you used it and you actually sent it around as if it were money, you know, initiating a Bitcoin transaction, I think the best case back then it would settle was maybe 5 hours, and sometimes it was the next day.
Wow.
And I just go back to those first few transactions when you actually either bought some,
that's right,
and you didn't know, or you sent some. Sending it was like uber scary, right? Because you just send it out into the ether, and you're like, I hope it gets there. And then 5 hours later, maybe you see that it got there.
I remember that. Yep.
I was like, I can send a wire right now. You know, it'll cost me $30, but I can send one and know that it's happening.
That's right.
So this is not a solution for people who are involved in, you know, settling an M&A transaction or, you know, funding an investment or something like that. This is not a replacement, right? This is it's a learning thing. It was great for teaching us about decentralization, teaching us about cryptography and using that, the double spin problem, everything. I mean, the white paper is brilliant from a, you know, the creativity and the pureness of the first expression of a digital asset. And I will forever be grateful to Satoshi, whoever they or he or she is, for expressing that and basically starting this, you know, this path like they did. But if you actually used it, it's not scalable. It's not a solution. And there's the environmental issue. You know, at the time, ESG, you know, environmental, social, and governance issues, which was pretty much about climate change, was the number one thing in the boardrooms of America. Like everybody was, the SEC was about to start rolling out rules for you to disclose your climate impact, you know, statements to your stockholders and this type of stuff. So I was keenly aware it had impacted my business already pretty substantially.
Wow.
Funds were not investing in the same rate that they were in the years prior, and so that meant the deal flow had slowed down and all that kind of stuff. And that was directly related to the social pressure of ESG. And so, how are you going to take what is arguably the most environmentally destructive asset in the world? To create it, you have to like use all this power. You know, in January, the Department of Energy came out with a report, and this freaked all the, you know, the libs out. But you know, that Bitcoin was consuming over 2% of all energy in America, and we're not close to, like I said, that's, you know, it has gotten up to $1 trillion in value.
Right.
I mean, imagine if it was actually the system.
Right.
We would melt. I mean, it would just disintegrate the earth or something, right?
Yeah.
Like not even. So that's the thing. You know, you're going digital. You're looking at the standard bearer being Bitcoin, and then you find the thing that's pre-mined, so there is no mining to it. It's this consensus mechanism, which is way more efficient, way more environmentally sound. and then it's like moving the value in 3 to 5 seconds. Like when you send it, it's like now, I don't know if you use Uphold at all, but Uphold to pull down, XRP to fiat, they've got instant settlement.
Right.
And that's only been for the past 2 months or so. They charge you a little fee, good for them. But the point is, to do that transaction before used to be 3 to 5 business days. It usually happened pretty fast. It usually be next day or the day after. But seeing that money move, literally, I've got one app open, the Uphold app, and then I pull up my Bank of America checking account, and it's there, is a mind-blowing thing to a guy my age.
Absolutely.
And to know that could happen peer-to-peer anywhere in the world.
It's huge.
And it's huge, and it's going to bring out. So it became obvious to me, and then the next layer is you start to look at, you looked at Ripple Labs, and their management team, all the different stuff they had going on, and what really got it wasn't. I mean, and I know I sound like this fanboy for Ripple, and I'm really not. We can get to another level of this conversation where I'm like, I don't know which side Ripple is on all this stuff.
Right.
But they've got a first-class board of directors and first-class management team.
Right.
And Brad Garlinghouse is the type of guy that I would have killed to have as a client, CEO of one of my clients when he's going on an analyst call or some big, bet the company business deal or something. He's got that really, reasonable disposition.
Right.
He's always on script. He never varies. So he's had hours and hours and hours of media training to do that. I mean, but that's just kind of his disposition. It's impressive. Chris Larson explains, the standardization of using digital assets probably better than anybody I've ever heard. He talks about container ships and how that revolutionized the shipping industry once they standardized that and everything. So you're talking about really visionary, super smart people. Their board, Rosie Rios, they had another guy who was from the Fed. You had the JP Morgan, former head of regulation at JP Morgan, who had been very key in upgrading from LIBOR to SOFR, the interest rate standards and stuff. It almost looked like it was the central bank. I mean, if you just started looking at those resumes, you're like, huh. And then you'd have Vitalik kind of go out on stage and like flap his wings and so just compare the teams, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that certainly helped, but even more than all that, even more than the utility, which was huge, the management team, pretty huge, but I wouldn't have made an investment decision on that. It was the relationships it was the relationships they already had and the ground they had already covered in the regulatory environment. In 2015, they had already had a settlement with FinCEN, where in the statement of facts, it called XRP a virtual currency.
Wow.
Not a security. They had a settlement. They paid a fine. They went and got licensed for money transmission and all that stuff because the federal government had already decided, as a matter of fact, what XRP was. It wasn't a security. There was tons of legal analysis out there by very highly respected attorneys. One of them, former CFTC commissioner Chris Giancarlo, who's he's a senior counsel at Wilkie Farr now, which is one of like the competitive firms, big law firm like I would have been dealing with. But he had done an analysis on Howey and XRP of the Howey test and applied it, and they had come to the conclusion it wasn't a security. There was just so many things that really had us feeling this is 2020, long before the lawsuit, that had us feeling really, really comfortable about XRP as a network, where it was headed. But at the end of the day, it was the relationships that they had with the central banks and the major financial institutions.
Absolutely.
There was one company, one network that kept coming up in the conversation, and every time it was Ripple and the XRPL. And I mean, it kind of has happened all right in front of our face. I'm shocked more people don't get it.
Yeah.
No.
Now,
I understand the frustration. I know we're going to get into this.
Absolutely.
So maybe we'll push that off for a while. But that was it. It was those factors,
Right.
that analysis, and we've been hard pressed to see something that competes on all those different areas.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just refreshing, obviously, for all the things that they've had to overcome, and the fact that they've shown time and time again nothing but integrity. Definitely had a phenomenal game plan, one that a lot of people tried to figure out. And I always say, let's just go back to, Brad Garlinghouse comment of, flip the switch moment. Obviously, they're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that we don't know about. There's some things that you can obviously see, but for me, it was refreshing to see how, when everything went bad, when we had that big drop from 68,000 and all the way down towards the $15,000-$16,000 range, how other companies were laying off, other companies were running, other companies were leaving the U.S., other banks were going out of it, and yet they kept thriving. They kept acquiring, doing acquisitions. They kept hiring some of the most brilliant people around the world, never wavering, never panicking, never. It was just so refreshing. And at that moment, they kept doing things that just made me feel, my gosh, this is special. And I've been around a long time. I've been around on some of the biggest stages. So it's very hard, even with you, it's very hard to impress people like you and I. And I don't say that to be facetious or anything like that, but just when you've seen so much, it's kind of like a person that walks by and sees a celebrity, but I used to hang out with them all the time and play, in these NBA celebrity games, so it was no big deal. When you see the type of, just who they are and how they represent themselves and the things that they're doing, it really impressed me, because I've seen some companies that look great from the outside, and then once you go to the inside, I remember one time, and I won't get into it, but I went to meet with these head of this Fortune 500 company in Italy, me and my friend John Singh, and I heard some things that they were saying about how they banked on their customers, a certain percentage of their customers to lose in order for the company to stay profitable. And I understand, hey, business is business, but it left such a bad taste in my mouth that when I flew back to California, I literally got out the company. I mean, just want to know affiliation. And so when you see various things like that, it just kind of makes you feel proud to be a part of a company that's doing it the right way, that doesn't have to ever go back and apologize, that never sacrifices integrity for growth. And when you look at, and we'll get into this, but when you look at what they had to endure over the last several years, to almost $200 million in legal fees, but continuously are victorious because of who they are in integrity and all the things that they've done right. And then you go back and you look at what's happening now with and I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, the SEC versus Ethereum. And look, there was never a guy on the side named Steven Naroff that was saying, I got a bunch of stuff on Ripple. They've done everything unethical. I mean, we didn't have that problem. And so when you look at all the things that he has, all the things that he's saying, that the fact that John Deaton has met with him and validated a lot of this information, it really makes you understand, especially with all the connections. We can go into Wang Chang, Prometheus, all this different stuff that's probably later on in our conversation, but it just makes you understand. And I always use this analogy, Jimmy, like, and you come from a time, you remember back in the 80s when we had, and I say it all the time, I'm sure people are sick of hearing it, but back in the 80s, there was this, in the Olympics, there was this skater, her name was Nancy Kerrigan, and she was one of the top skaters in the world, and her and Tonya Harding had to go perform, but she was the first up, and so Tonya Harding had this whole little deal that she had a mugger, a mugger in the alley, hit her in the ankle, hurt her ankle, and it was this whole conspiracy, which later got found out. And I feel like that's really the way I look at Ethereum and XRP and what the SEC has done. There was a plot, there was a plan, there was an agenda. They know exactly what they're doing. They knew exactly what XRP, the problem that it solved. And so your views on that before we go on to the next question, which is going to be a little bit in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, look, the SEC lawsuit has now been, I think, it's all out there now because of ETHGate and all this stuff, that it really was our federal government attempted to, or some portion of it attempted to put their thumb on the scale of the free market.
Right.
And, it was obvious to us, again, I told you about all that diligence we had done, because we are acquiring, most of the holdings we have to this day are from 2020. Right. So, when that happened and they filed the lawsuit, and then everyone left the next day, including the chairman, that was unprecedented, right? That to my knowledge of basically watching securities cases and being involved in those markets, there's never been anything like that. Kind of like, oh, let's decapitate these guys, or let's hit them on the ankle and then exit stage left, so we're not here for the fallout. So I think, like John Deaton, it was immediately obvious to me that the lawsuit was the weapon. They didn't care if they were victorious at the end of this. It was the fact that they were going to put, the ecosystem in a holding pattern for however many years.
Stifle the innovation.
So, I see a lot of people in our community, and, I love everybody, and I certainly understand the frustration, believe me.
Yeah.
But these markets are not performing correctly. Right?
That's correct.
There is an overhang on XRP in particular because of this lawsuit.
Right.
And we know now that it's driven by fraud and regulatory capture and all this. I mean, that's basically been proven, even though there were so many facts that it was obvious that you really can't look at, what's happening and on the charts and look at it vis-a-vis the rest of the market and make that make sense. Right.
I want to ask you a personal question. When it comes to what you're seeing right now with, how does it make you feel? Is it validation in your pursuit and fight and getting the truth out there when you see judges in the legal system calling Gary Gensler and the SEC their actions to be those of criminal or lying or have an agenda and all the things that are coming out right now? Is that personally gratifying, saying, you know what, we knew they were lying the whole time, we knew they had a corrupted agenda the whole time, we knew this was a corrupted game of chess, we knew this was about stifling the innovation, trying to stop what was happening? It was, like you said, it wasn't about winning and losing. It was about, in my opinion, keeping this technology down and really hurting the people that believed in it. Because I really believe this is all about control, Jimmy. I believe that it's not about a race, but about the American people. I believe it's financial slavery. I believe, they want to continue to have people in a position where they do just enough not to get fired. They pay us just enough not to quit. And then we look forward to retiring on the percentage of what barely got us by in the first place. And so that to me is a form of slavery. Is obviously this matrix that they want to keep you in, and they cause issues like, and I won't get into this, but they cause issues of financial or health wise, and then they have you come to them looking for the answer when they were the ones that caused it. So your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I am a freedom loving patriot, and you and I could have a whole nother 3-hour show on some of the issues you're tap dancing around right now.
That's right. I'm doing my best.
Again, I did say when the pandemic hit, I was one of these people that they basically woke me up, right? So they ripped the veil off all at one time for a guy like me, which was probably not super smart on their part.
Right.
How do I feel about the stuff that's coming out now? I'll be real honest with you. I'm moved on a little bit from it.
Okay.
I spent so many years angry and putting this stuff out and basically broadcasting it out into the matrix.
Right.
And what I really wanted to be doing was building businesses and building products and stuff that are going to be revolutionary.
Right.
So fortunately, I think there's been a new energy in 2024 in particular. I think we're all feeling it.
That's right.
And it is not even just related to the XRP ETHGate stuff, which is bubbling up and people, but it's kind of across the board. We're learning about a whole bunch of things.
Yeah,
the political class and different things. The pandemic, all that stuff is starting to be revealed. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I didn't feel a little validated, but I knew all that stuff already.
Yeah.
So it part of me just a little sad that it's taken so long.
That's right. Yeah.
It's been such a waste of otherwise what would have been productive time. I mean, imagine what we'd be doing now if the lawsuit never would have happened.
That's right. That's right.
All of 2020, 2021, 2022 would have been like building these amazing it it would be so valuable. Now that's all still going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's all going to happen.
Right.
But there's some people who aren't going to make it. I mean, they put there was so much financial pressure put on other people who
Right.
unfortunately weren't in the position that say you or Valhil was in and couldn't kind of weather the storm.
Right.
And that's horrible. That's horrible
Right. Yeah.
because people have been damaged in that way, retirements lost, all this stuff.
And I think, yeah, and I think that's the point, Jimmy, is like, you know, for so long, it seemed like we were part of this weird, you know, circle of people that just got ridiculed and everyone was against us. And I say us because even though I'm diversified in other assets, if you're part of that, you know, as far as that support with XRP and Ripple, you felt it. You felt people turn their back on you. You felt other, you know, and I won't get into it, other people who own other projects turn their back and just down talk. And for me, it's just, like I said, it's just the validation that I feel proud, I guess is the word I'm looking for, that we were right. And that and sometimes in being right, even though we're still getting the judicial system to validate that we're right, and we've been very victorious in doing that as well, from Judge Annalisa Torres to the 3-0 victories we've been having, and obviously this is coming to a conclusion. But it's just one of those things where you just feel proud to know that you bet, and I wouldn't say bet, but you did your research and you support the right company. And so as I get into this, I'm gonna skip past one question and then go back to my other question, which is, that's why I feel like, and I used to always tell people this, and I don't want to seem, you know, like, again, I'm some what's it called, Maxi or something like that. But it really does validate this next question, which is, do you feel Ripple is a solid company, and why?
Well, I don't even need to feel. I know Ripple's a solid company, just as a business. And you know, we own Ripple equity as well as XRP through the Link2 platform. Shout out to Link2.
Absolutely.
So you know, they've obviously been, as you've been pointing out, they've been growing, they've been recruiting, they've been doing the most material M&A transactions in the sector that have occurred. I think they're going to continue to do that. I know that they're sitting on multiple billions of dollars in cash,
right?
And they have a war chest held, you know, indirectly through the escrow of XRP, which, you know, I personally believe is substantially undervalued. Anybody who's followed me knows me pretty much believe that it should be at a much higher place in order to serve the functions that it was designed to do.
Right.
So yeah, very solid company. The management's great. I think they would have liked to have gone public before now, but obviously that's a negotiation with the SEC. Even if they were to try to go public now, you know, a lot of these matters that are involved in litigation would have to be fought out across the table with the S1. I know Garlinghouse has alluded to potentially listing, you know, on an international exchange or something like that. I don't think they'll ultimately have to go there. I still believe that you know, we're headed to some type of financial event adjustment,
right?
And we can kind of talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But yes, I think Ripple is a solid company, and I think XRP is a solid asset as well.
I agree with you. Now, I don't know if you actually saw this video where I talked about you guys as far as in a very positive way of Valle Capital and the prediction.
Thank you for that.
I'm a huge fan, I have to admit. And I talked about your evaluation. I talked about Ripple's evaluation. It's actually tagged to the front of my page. I want you to hear this real quick and then make a comment on it, if you don't mind. So let me go ahead and share this real quick. And then I'll have you make a comment up based off of what I'm saying here. $10 XRP will change most people's lives. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I also agree it's going to probably be one of the biggest regrets that people made. Because again, if Valle Capital, who said a possibility of a $25,000 to $35,000 XRP by 2030, let's say they're 10% right. That's $2,500 to $3,500. Let's say they're 1% right. That's $250 to $350. Okay, screw them. Forget that. I mean, screw them, but forget that analogy. Let's go with Ripple itself.
XRP, in order to work the way it has to globally, has to be at least $10,000. Okay, let's say they're 10% right. That's $1,000. Okay, let's say they're 1% right. That's $100. So my whole thing is, I think a lot of people are going to miss the 1% potential at $5 or $10, maybe $20. I think that's where people just have to have a solid plan, because I mean, $10 million isn't what it used to be back in the day. And again, that's not financial advice. I'm just saying people have to be smart. Everyone's going to have different levels. A $10 XRP changes a lot of people's lives. $100,000 changes a lot. So I'm not trying to dismiss that. All I'm saying is you should have levels of where you're cashing out. You have strategic levels of where you're cashing out, and I wouldn't go all out at a certain dollar. Again, that's not financial advice, but man, I don't know what's greater, to get $10 or to live with a life full of regretment if it potentially hits 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or anything else that they're saying. It'd be crazy. Between all of us here, the stocks of Pepto-Bismol are going to go up because you're going to have a lot of sick people that missed the boat. $10.
So that's my assessment based off of your amazing overview of where it could potentially go. I know I see a lot of people in the chat right now wanting me to ask that question. So obviously my question would be is, where did you guys, what motivated you guys to come up with that evaluation? How did you guys get to that? Because there's a lot of people feel that you're that's still undervalued, that of what the potential could be. So I think when you shot
the numbers, even
and I saw something that Lewis Jackson, and by the way, shouts out to him, and I hope he gets his X account back. It was hacked, but he did an evaluation where he broke it down on a paper. And when he came with it on a very low end, he said like 7,000 to like 70,000. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, but he broke it down, predicate off of some mathematical equations. And it was phenomenal. I also saw this with Will Fix did the same thing where he broke it down on a piece of paper. So it's I think people don't really understand the potential what we're talking about. If you don't mind, just I know this is probably a little bit off subject as I want to go into the John Deaton's question, but what motivated you to do it, and how did you guys come up with those numbers? And what do you say when people say, hey, that might be still undervalued?
Yep. It was a journey about how we ended up doing it. So, by the spring, summer of 2021, I had learned enough in my due diligence around the lawsuit and kind of Ethereum's involvement, how Bill Hinman was, in an awkward situation, pretty much. So I had learned a lot more than the average person knew at that time around those players in particular.
Right.
And so as we sat here in the shop and talked about, who could really be pulling the strings on this to make, a federal agency go after this company, cause all this market uncertainty, risk their reputations and their careers to do so.
Right.
We're talking this could, depending on certain facts, if it is the case that, say, China was paying these people indirectly to basically do that,
right,
that's treason, right? I mean, so this is not like little kid stuff we're talking about.
That's right.
It's the type of stuff that would have given you a pretty major pause. It had taken me a lot more than $15 million to compromise my country.
If it was you and I, we probably would have got thrown in the back of the van with Steven as well.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I mean, these events I'm about to tell you about, I walk around my house a few times. I got a good story about that, actually.
Yeah, share it. By all means, share it.
It's not as dramatic as Steven's story. That's
right.
Insane what's happening.
Right.
So anyway, I did this like open letter, like in the summer, I think it was, where I just was trying to help the community orient to what was really going on. Okay, so
right.
you've got someone that has the power to control a very, very financial regulator in our country.
That's right.
And who has the power to do that, right? Well, you're pretty much talking about our central bank. It's right. Really the only. So I knew that this was a Fed Reserve Treasury level, type thing. So I wrote this open letter, basically said, realize who's on the other side of the table from you is right. Not, it's not James saying he'll pick it up for 61 cents.
Right.
It's not Jimmy saying he'll pick it up for $1.50.
Right.
It's someone else that's got a lot of power. So recognize that. And then I'd say, because of the response I had about that, I started to think about, the gold confiscation that occurred during the Depression, and all the policies that got changed. And basically, that was the first major removal from the gold standard that Richard Nixon had finished up in 1971 by moving to the petrodollar completely. So it's like we need, if it just stays nebulous like this, and there's never someone on the other side of the table right now, like if this comes up once we know about all the bullshit that happened,
Right.
it'll be too late to have come up with what the value was back then and assess how significant the damages are. So I was like, we need to kind of have some type of a counterbalancing transaction, right? So we ultimately, I think I was headed to an Astros game with my brother-in-law. I was like, we should propose a deal to the Fed and
Wow.
organize a buyout of the XRP, but at the value that we believe the ultimate intended value of it.
Wow.
So that, and that's what I did all my career, was term sheets and negotiate these huge M&A transactions. So that was like on a Saturday. I think I woke up Sunday going, can I cuss on this show?
Okay? Oh, absolutely. You're more than fine.
I woke up on Sunday going, there is no fucking way I'm going to do that.
Right. Right.
Basically gripped with fear.
Right.
And then I came into the office Monday morning with this kind of attitude of like, it won't hurt if I just kind of rough them out.
Right.
Rough out the terms on the computer, And so did that, shared it with the guys, and everybody's like, yeah, we should move forward with this.
Wow.
And I was like, well, no one's going to give a shit about what some fledgling little, hedge fund venture capital firm in Houston thinks about the price of XRP. I said, we need to pull together some people who can actually debate about it and look at different things. So that became the first iteration of what we called the confidential committee. We did come up with a value. We actually proposed a couple, and I think we made a couple of proposals to the Federal Reserve.
Right.
That didn't go anywhere, and then towards the end of 22, we kind of dropped it in 21. As 22 started, we kind of dropped the whole thing. We had some people who had called the various district banks at the Fed. I think it was the St. Louis district actually confirmed that they had received it, and they said they'd be happy to talk to us about it.
Wow.
And when we tried to call them, of course, no response.
Right.
So we kind of dropped it, and then all of 22 goes by, and basically in the second half of 22 is when all this Hinman stuff really starts to go mainstream.
Right.
And so now a lot of the influencers are starting to put out all this stuff of what becomes known as ETHGate.
That's right.
And there's all these videos of these, Joe Lubin and Vitalik Buterin and all of these people going out live on stage and making this commentary and basically incriminating themselves. It was kind of shocking when you kind of put it in a timeline chronology and then read through. It's like, how did that happen? We did not have Narioff yet at that time. Right?
That's right.
Who was actually one of the amigos at the table while this was all going on.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons they spoke so openly, because they probably didn't think that he would come forward with the things that he said. And they were really talking recklessly. If you really start looking and piecing together some of the things they said, it's like, you'd have been better off just being quiet, but you really incriminated yourself with a lot of the stuff that they said.
Yeah. The forces, how do I say this? The type of character that leads someone to commit those types of things is the same thing that kind of leads them to brag about it.
We see it all the time. Yep,
you see it all the time. So it was in the context of so we said, well, let's put the committee back together, since this is starting to be kind of known. And now we have like a whole bunch of relationships that we didn't have before. So the committee we did end of 22 going into 23 was like 54 people.
Well, I think it was refreshing. I don't mean to cut you off, because for so long you had Joe Catch, you had this narrative of Ripple saying, well, it needs to be at least 10,000 to do. And then to have you guys, it was like a fresher breath air. I'm not going to lie. We needed it. The space needed it. Those who, this family, we needed that. And so, because what it did is it opened our eyes to the possibilities. And then once you really got it and your evaluation was so brilliant that you start going, my God, that might actually be undervalued now that we understand it. And so it was something that I think we needed as you know, as a whole in the space, for sure.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
So we had some amazing, so we ended up forming a couple of subcommittees in the 22-23 iteration, and one of them was a valuation subcommittee.
Right.
And on that we had investment bankers, accountants, and these are like from firms, you know, type of thing.
Right.
And myself, you know, Molly was on that committee. And we had XRP Lion was on the committee as well.
Right.
So everybody kind of, you know, different people kind of generated their own models. A lot of them were more kind of what I'd call traditional valuation methodologies.
Okay.
Like we use the discounted cash flow methodology like you would to value any business, and
Correct.
just thought about the XRPL as if it were like a pipeline, right? With whatever values moving through it. So that was the type of, so basically the cash flow through the pipeline is what ended up generating that valuation.
Wow.
We of course had the biologist show about Dr. Dion Bacchus, show up from South Africa, like a manna from heaven godsend thing, and probably came up with the model that all of us, I think, if we're being honest, really go, that's probably it. Because when you would put in the inputs of like the volume and the trades and the various stuff that were happening at that time, called February 23, we're working on his model, it actually spit out what the price was at that time.
Wow.
So we were like, that was kind of validation of that.
Okay.
My contribution was called the collateralization model. That's like, we tokenize every asset onto the XRPL.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because the way I think about it from a balance sheet perspective, I mean, it's called a ledger, right?
Right.
It's a ledger.
Right.
Okay. For accounting, we have ledgers. Okay.
Right. Right.
And you have accounts where you keep track of the various assets. So if you basically took every asset, tokenized it, and put it onto the global balance sheet, what would the global balance sheet say that it was worth?
Right.
That is the whole approach, which led us down the whole, what is all the money? What is all the value? Which in and of itself is a fascinating exploratory process. I think we came up with all that we could identify was like 5.3 quadrillion, which is like that Dr. Evil number. It's like
right.
quadrillion dollars. But you know, then we had to write it up, you know, and had everybody's input. Then we did use the old existing one that Susan Affey and Robbie Mitchnick, who, you know, Susan Affey was a Ripple board member, a Stanford business school professor. Mr. Mitchnick had actually been in the graduate program with her at Stanford, and then he went to Ripple briefly, and then over to he runs digital assets for BlackRock now.
Nice.
So they had done the Affey-Mitchnick model. We used that one, but with like some updated kind of assumptions, and that spit out a pretty high number. But it was an academic exercise. We picked 2030 and then discounted them back to present because we kind of wanted to get people out of the mindset of having the lawsuit and all the bullshit that surrounds kind of our present day, and say, even one of my biggest critics in this journey has been Matt Hamilton. I don't know if you know Matt. He's a former Ripple employee. I think he kind of was a developer liaison guy at Ripple, and you know, he was quite critical of some of the numbers we were putting out and stuff like that. But even him, when you would ask him, Matt, do you think XRP is ever going to get to $100? He'd say, yeah, well, maybe in 10 years.
Right.
Okay, let's take that.
Right.
$100 in 10 years, if you discount that back to today and find out that that's about $38.60-something.
Correct.
So even the harshest critics, when they would like be honest and say, yeah, I think this, well, we're still not reflecting what you've really think in the current what we're calling the market, right?
Right.
So
Right.
whenever, if you have studied investing much, you clearly have, and you've not only studied it, you've been active in it.
Right.
People like Warren Buffett, value investors, say when you can buy an asset for a market value that's less than what you believe it is, that's a good investment.
Absolutely.
You just made a really good investment. So yeah, I think in most cases XRP is a good investment. The FUD and we've had kind of this developer mutiny in XRP and stuff, where they can't stand Ripple and don't think Ripple's doing enough. This is one thing they kind of need to understand. That's the whole point.
Right.
Ripple
Exactly.
can't do anything for it because maybe then it's a security.
That's
right? So
right.
maybe from your perspective, you really do think XRP is a security. We don't. We have no expectations that Ripple is going to go out and do some miraculous thing that's going to increase the value of XRP.
Absolutely.
We certainly appreciate them, just like Valhil, just like James, just like all these other businesses out there who are making use of XRP, finding new use cases and stuff. That's going to drive adoption and value into the network. We're all participating in that.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And I want to take a moment. I'm going to ask you guys to do me a huge favor. Go over to Jimmy's X page. Make sure you support this gentleman and all that he's doing. You can see right here, Jimmy Valle, at JValle2000. Make sure you guys follow him and support everything he's doing. We're also going to go over and take a look at, if you go to his X page and you click the link, it'll take you to this site right here, which is ValilAdvisors.io, and it's called Valil Advisors. It shows about services, Vault news, contact. Make sure you go over here and check out everything that they're doing as well. And also, shouts out to all you guys that are here today. You're getting a lot of love in the chat right now. There's just under 1,000 people viewing live. And so thank you guys for being here. Crypto Navigator Liz Herrera, Marvin Davis, Brendan Dobbin, Crypto Tales, Baller Not One, When Mullet. We appreciate all you guys. Miss C888, Maya from Fruition Productions. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Hey, Maya.
She's here. We've got Crypto OG. We've got Optimistic Prime, one of the panel members from Ladies Night, which you guys make sure you guys check out this Friday coming up at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to catch our incredible interview with no other than Molly Elmore Thursday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Jimmy, I'd like to really quickly, before I go into my next question, someone who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, I'm also going to ask her the same question. If you could just give a quick little overview of what you think about Molly Elmore and what she's been doing here in the space. And I'm sorry, I blindsided you with that question, but I felt like, it was on the tip of my tongue. I know we both respect her and value who she is. Just a few words, if you could, about Molly.
Yeah, well, Molly's incredible, good friend and my partner in Valhil. And we've traveled this journey over the last kind of year and a half. I think I came upon Molly's content, like a lot of people, in the way she would break things down in infographic form. Super simple, super clear. She has spent the better part of the year training me how to be a better communicator and really been instrumental to the success of our firm and where we're headed in our strategic objectives. So I love her to pieces. What can I say? She's amazing.
She's incredible, and we definitely appreciate Molly and all those who, from a female perspective, the value that they bring to the space. Brilliant minds, and we definitely need that support. So definitely appreciate and shouts out to Molly there. So with that being said, let's get into the question I've been kind of moving around here. Is John Deaton running against Elizabeth Warren? What do you think that means for Senate? What do you think that means for not just XRP, but crypto as a whole? Win or lose, what do you think that means for the space?
Well, I think for crypto as a whole, you couldn't have a better thing, right? Because he's at least bringing that awareness and discussion to the highest levels of what we'll call it our current governmental situation is. John's a hero in our community, in our space, from very forward-leaning actions that he did, right in the beginning. We worked a lot with John kind of in the early innings of the SEC case. I consider him a friend, fully support his race for Senate, and who he's going up against needs to be replaced for a lot of different reasons.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I just wish him all the best and hope that he's very, very successful. He's already been mega successful, just as a person, individual, and this is just going to be another amazing thing he does.
Another chapter to his incredible story. Now, I want to kind of go in this direction here, and I know we've kind of talked about, we're not here to, obviously give, we're not financial advisors, and I know we've kind of answered XRP in the short term, maybe in the long term, kind of, sort of. If you want to tap on that, but I also want you to maybe lead into that too. Why do you feel people are getting frustrated right now? There's so many people right now that are frustrated with the price. And they're looking over, well, hold on, and again, this doesn't even exist. Somebody might make a meme of it after the show, but Chicago coin. So they're like, well, why isn't XRP pumping 1,000% like Chicago coin or Moon Boy coin or whatever it is? And there's just people who are getting frustrated because I don't even want to say why. Why do you think people are getting frustrated, Jimmy? Your answer, if you were to talk to the 1,000 now people who are watching this between X Live and YouTube, and they're just frustrated, because I see some of the comments in the group, in the chat here. What do you say to those people who are getting frustrated?
Well, I'm frustrated too. Number one, so let me say that. But
right.
I think in a different way.
Right.
There's a Tom Petty song that comes to mind, which is "The waiting is the hardest part." Right. To a certain extent, this is a blessing, because we are learning things about our own character and our own ability to weather certain adversities that, had this experience not occurred, we may not grow up and mature in the way that we are all now going to grow up and mature. So I
don't want to cut you off, Jimmy. I want you to continue, but that is a brilliant answer. I've asked that question so many times, and that's so brilliant what you just said. If it would have happened fast, I don't think we would have appreciated it. That's amazing. Yeah.
I know I wouldn't have So when I see that a lot of the comments about the frustration comments, it's like Ripple should be doing this or they should be doing that. I view this whole game from a different perspective than that. I don't think Ripple can be, or even be perceived to be, doing some of the things that they want to do in a manner that would influence the price. And I think it's been proven in the lawsuit. One of the things that's been proven very clearly is that XRP doesn't actually move based on activities by Ripple itself. It effectively moves with the broader crypto market.
Correct.
So if Bitcoin's doing something, then XRP may, do what it does. But the frustration is kind of missing the point, in my opinion. It is incumbent upon us to take these utility assets and use them in a business case or a productive way that is good for us and our families and our partners and things like that. I think everyone has come to some type of conclusion, if you're an XRP holder in the way deep in the community, such that you can even have a leg to stand on, express frustration, because you've been in it a while, right? And you should know that there is something you could be doing with the asset to make it productive and useful.
Right.
This is everything we have done from Valhil has been about driving the adoption of the asset.
Correct.
And that is to be used in businesses for working capital, streamline your payments, issue tokens, and it's not the easiest one to issue tokens, because it doesn't have smart contract capabilities. But there are firms out there, we're partnering with some of them, that have solved that riddle, right? So they've got the necessary, components to bridge the gap, so you can be issuing tokens that have smart contract type features on the XRPL. That's super exciting. So, we're at a time when all the roads that lead back to Rome are
That's
being
right.
constructed,
Right.
all throughout the world. The global plumbing, the global pipeline of the entire new financial system,
Right.
like Larry Fink says, every financial asset, every stock, every bond, every derivative, physical assets are going to be, the ownership rights, that's going to be tokenized and put on a blockchain. We believe that XRPL is going to, if not be the layer one, it's going to be a very material percentage of what the ultimate layer one is. That requires XRP to move value.
There's an interesting question here where a guy, one of our members, appreciate you very much, Nesforce. He says, I think that's the frustration. BTC did move even past its all-time high, and XRP's moved a little bit. But I think that's the thing, is that people don't understand. And thank you for that question, Nesforce, or that comment.
I'd like to add something real quick there. That reminds me of a point I wanted to make.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
People do not realize how manipulated by the venture capital firms that the digital asset space has been, especially when you start talking outside of the blue chip. I would consider the blue chip Bitcoin, XRP, and Ethereum. Okay. Right. And everybody knows how I think about Ethereum. So those would be blue chip. Anything else is basically, I wouldn't call it a meme coin, but you need to be looking hard at what the utility is, all this stuff. Correct. But what is happening is these venture capital firms are showing up at the very early innings of one of these firms starting. Right. They're giving them a lot of money and they're getting an allocation of these tokens. They are then turning their media assets on and pumping the value of these things to oblivion and then dumping on the people who are chasing the zeros and the green candles. And it's happening over and over. Luna, FTX, FTT coin, Serum coin, every one of these things that you end up seeing failing in spectacular fashion. It's the same exact business model. Okay. So we're kind of living in a world that you can't really look at these charts and, see these green candles and actually really believe that that's doing anything besides they're sucking in people to dump on.
People don't realize that these massive liquidations, this a lot of this volatility in these massive liquidations is a form of manipulation. And you see it so often, where it's like sometimes TA doesn't even play a factor, like you said. And a lot of times I think of the turtle and the hare. I think people. It's kind of like sometimes you got to dumb it down to something like that, where fast doesn't always last. It's fast is not necessarily what we need. And like kind of going back to Nesforce's comment, is a lot of people still think it's going to be people like me and Jimmy and all of you that's going to move XRP to these evaluations. You don't get it. I mean, you just don't get it. I mean, that's why, if you got your, and again, just saying this kindly, if you got your MicroStrategy, your Michael Saylor, your Kathy Wizard Arc Investments, and they're making all these predictions. So the masses are following the big money. And so retail can move that price up and down. And obviously Tether can, we know what's going on. That's a whole nother conversation about what's going on with Evergrande and the biggest, one of the biggest scandals in China's history, bigger than Bernie Madoff, bigger than Enron, bigger than FTX. And who's tied into that? Tether. I always say that's the ace of spades. I predicted the Binance. I predicted the Ethereum, ETHGate. If you look back at any of our videos, I said it's the Jack, the Queen, the King, and the ace. I think the Jack was FTX in the game of spades, which is unbeatable. Those four cards, if you level up. The Queen to me is Binance. The King is ETHGate, and the ace of spades, where I think they're just going to play that card at the right moment, because it just always seems like things. Every time something good happens, the SEC has a way of playing this card. Oh, Ethereum's a security. Well, why didn't you say that when you were sitting in front of the congressional committee? I mean, it's just everything is a corrupted game of chess, and I think that ace of spades we need to watch out for, because everyone's talking about a great reset, a black swan. What bigger thing could cause that than Tether going down or finally having a full audit. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think people don't realize that it's institutional adoption. It's when all these legal wolves are behind us. We have regulatory clarity, and finally, the people who are in the shadows, the thing that Ripple has been doing the best, continuously building behind closed doors. When all that stuff comes into fruition, boom. That's why I say people are going to miss it, because people are going to still be making their investments and taking profits predicated off of retail, not predicated off of what it was created for. And I think that's why people are going to miss it in a big way. I said it's going to be one of the greatest stories or the worst regrets that people have. One of those two. So, but yeah, I think that's kind of answering this Force's question, is why Bitcoin's moving to XRP, because it's not being utilized for what it was created for. Your take on that, Jim?
I agree. I think we're still very, very early in the adoption. And there's two worlds. There's the inside the United States world, and then there's what's happening outside. Outside the United States, XRP is by far the most desired digital asset to hold and use and everything.
Absolutely.
And they're all building and want more assets, more digital assets created. And it's a tragedy, really, what the SEC and our federal government has done. But I mean, the federal government has messed up all kinds of policies. This is just got to throw it in the basket, right? But yeah, with respect to the progress of digital assets, it's the exact opposite approach they took when the internet rolled out.
Yeah,
you and I are old enough to recall that, the internet went through this too. Like I was talking earlier about, we had the internet in like 91.
right.
The boom didn't happen until 99.
Right.
Like 98, 99, 2000. And even that, Amazon barely survived. Google barely survived.
That's right.
AOL gone, right?
Gone,
like,
right.
There were so many pets.coms who went public. I mean, these companies actually listed their securities on a public exchange, and there was nothing there. It's just, if you had a .com, you went to the moon. It's the same phenomenon kind of happening in digital assets now.
I agree.
It would have been, if you'd have oriented yourself at that time to say what is actually useful, what's solving a problem, all this type of stuff. If you were to listen to Jeff Bezos talk back then when he drove around the Honda Accord, and he wasn't as like buff and like attractive as he is now.
Money can do that. Money can do that. and so funny, Jimmy, is people don't realize, when you think about the .com, like you said, it's like everything repeats until it doesn't. And when you think about all those projects, pet.com and this .com, and then you see the big bubble pop, it's like we don't even take here to the warnings of things that we've seen before. So when people make comments like 90% of these assets that are here today won't be here tomorrow, that's a bubble pop. That's when everything comes and all the clarity comes, and people have to, probably one of the only things that Gary Gensler said that made any kind of sense to me is when he said, just because XRP and Ripple are being victorious in the things that they're doing doesn't mean everyone else is going to get a free pass. They all have to fight their own fight, and people don't realize that. So when they say that 90% or 90% of cryptos won't be here, that's a bubble pop. And when it pops, people will be saying, what just happened? Pay attention to what happened back in the .com day, and maybe you'll kind of understand and get it.
Do you know who the largest loser in the .com era was?
Who's that?
Is a company called, they lost billions of dollars. It was called MicroStrategy, and it's run by a guy named Michael Saylor.
Wow.
So, like you said, things, it doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes, right?
It rhymes.
People need head on a swivel. If you don't, what's the Bob Marley line? If you don't know your history, then you won't know where you're coming from, right?
That's exactly it. Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So let me ask you this: where do you? Before we even go to this question, your thoughts on what Fruition production is doing as far as this documentary, XRP Unleashed, ETHGate, bringing in some heavy hitters like yourself, like Molly, like Stephen Nero, John Deaton, some of the most brilliant minds in this space. What is that documentary going to mean? What does it mean now, and what will it mean to people ongoing? I think your comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's patriotic and heroic, in my opinion.
Yeah,
what they're doing, and that they're, Christopher and Maya and their team is staying so true to kind of, being honest and telling the actual story. They've already been hit with a lot of hate and venturing into some of the topics that have been taboo in our broader digital asset community for some amount of time. So I admire them as people for being brave enough to do what they're doing and tell the story that needs to be told. Self-financing it, by the way, which is amazing. And I hope that it has a major impact on not just the digital asset sector, but kind of society as a whole.
Right.
I know that, like you said, there's so many amazing people that they've been able to pull in and talk to. I think it's going to be really special. I think now they're talking about it's going to be a multiple series type thing, because there's just so much information and content. You couldn't really tell it in like one movie or something.
No.
But it's amazing what they're doing, and Godspeed that they make it to the end.
Absolutely, yes. I think they're talking about a 6-part series, and I'm pushing for them. I'm behind them, and to further that, their story off camera, and just the fact that they were two people grinding the 9 to 5 that just got sick and tired of being sick and tired and questioned everything, and that led to this pursuit, this journey in crypto that was really a very short-term, phenomenal success story, and I'm still trying to get them to tell it. We're working on getting them on and bringing them onto the show, so I'm looking forward to that and telling that backstory on that. So I don't want to deviate too much, but there's some people in here that I've got some phenomenal questions about.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So one of the questions I have from Crypto Tales, Crypto4Life 6AJ, can you ask his opinion on the escrow?
So not like opinion, like on its impact on price, whether it's a good idea.
He didn't elaborate. I'm just going to let you flow with that. I'm going to let you flow with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm one of these believers that the escrow was kind of something that they had to do as a protective measures. So what predated the escrow, which I think went into effect December of 2017, was the 15 or 20 JP Morgan senior level executives that showed up at Ripple.
Right.
Where I think they were effectively demanding what they got from Ethereum, which was 50% of the network or something like that. Right. But Gary Gensler had been at MIT basically saying you would have to pay the monopolist maybe 50%. And so I think the escrow was a middle finger to the legacy banking system that was very much trying to capture the network at the time. So they put it in escrow, and they came up with, a pretty reasonable, sound distribution policy. The one thing I'll say, I see tons of people lamenting, Ripple's dumping on the market. Or 200 million came out of stuff. It's like, guys, look, it's very analogous to like when you have a preferred stock offering in a public company, that preferred stock is going to roll out over some period of time once it's covered by a registration statement. It's called the overhang, and it's already basically priced in, right? Everybody knows there is 100 billion, of course, much less than that now, because not much less, but less than that now because of the what's been burned in transactions. But you can assume, all of our valuations assume that ultimately that is all out onto the market, and it'll be, market. We've already passed the initial 55 months of, the escrow. So it was originally programmed to come out $1 billion a month, right, for 55 months.
Right.
So they've already surpassed, I forget, I haven't looked at this in a while, but we'd be in month 60 something by now. And they've, added what they didn't put into the market on the back end. So they're trying to implement a pretty conservative monetary policy, and keep some type of equilibrium in the supply and demand. But I personally wouldn't care if they dumped it all on the market tomorrow. I think if they had a path to do it, and the federal government wouldn't tackle them, they probably would.
Okay.
I think the escrow was a good idea for them. I think it protected the network, which is that's the most important thing.
Right.
And let's grow up a little bit, and not always assume that
Absolutely.
things are for the bad just because the price appreciation hasn't been what people wanted.
I think at the end, we're going to find out what they're doing right now is brilliant and is in the best interest of XRP Ledger, and everything that they're doing. So a couple more questions from the chat here. Does Jimmy have an opinion about whether or not he feels the SEC should be regulating crypto, or should it be the Commodities Commission?
So yes, I do have opinion. I believe that, and we put out a infographic on this probably 3 weeks ago, what we call capital markets reform, and this is a big part of it. So what we believe that the SEC, and really Congress as well, has failed to do is basically make the rules of the road clear with respect to digital assets generally. There is certainly a whole large class of these assets which are securities. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
We actually underwrote, Valhil Capital underwrote the first NFT offered in a securities complying, offered as a security. We actually programmed economic rights into the NFT back in 2021. We leaned into that. We were like, why is everyone trying to run away from the securities laws? There's certainly ways to work within the securities laws,
right,
and have these digital assets serve in that manner. So I believe, like Larry Fink and like most of the the leaders in the financial industry, that we are all going to go where we've already embarked on a generational tokenization project.
Right.
It's going to take, I don't know, 30 years to tokenize everything. But it's well underway, and a lot of those will be securities, and there's nothing wrong with that. They were securities before in paper form. Just because you're taking the stock certificate or the uncertificated interest and turning it into a token, so what? So that's like easy, and for the normal rules to apply to that, your holding periods, if you're doing a private placement, your registration statement requirements, audited financials. So if you're running a business through and you're selling equity or debt into the market, you should comply with the securities laws. That's not hard. Whether the use of certain things like Ethereum for gas fees, what Narioff came up with as far as let's turn it into a good. It's a commodity. I think there's probably a case for certain layer ones to be treated in that manner. To me, though, it's almost irrelevant. You have anti-market manipulation things in commodities just like you do in securities.
Right.
The big problem with the way it is now is that there's no way for just someone who wants to comply with law to just go comply with law and run their business. So that's a huge problem. B, because of the lack of characterization of these different buckets, you're allowing certain people to trade in what are clearly securities. So they're insider trading.
Right.
Think about everyone on that list that talked to Bill Hinman and knew that Ethereum was going to get a free pass.
Yeah,
so they shorted XRP and went long Ethereum until the 11% spike happened in the minutes after he gave the speech. That's insider trading, right?
Yeah,
so
they don't do that. They don't do that in our country, do they, Jimmy?
Oh my God, we're the masters of it. And this is another reason why we have to go digital as well. Like naked short selling has been the single biggest attribute or process for taking wealth from Main Street. It's been like $100 trillion have been taken by Wall Street from Main Street doing naked short selling, which is effectively creating synthetic securities, right? Having having a covered position where you actually borrowed the asset from someone and you're paying them interest, I got no problem with you shorting in that manner. But when you're just like dumping a short on the market that you can't cover, right? Which is done in, it's big in AMC, but it is happening rampantly. Let me tell you, it's happening with XRP, I'm pretty sure, pretty substantially. But that's why everything's going to have to go digital, because you'll have to at least borrow the unit, right? Because you'll have to settle it so fast. You won't be able to like just create the phantom thing and be trading it with paper.
Well, I know we're coming up on an hour and a half here. We've got about 1,200 live viewers, but so I can't take any more questions from the chat. But I will move on here, where I skip a couple things and get into thoughts on Swift and XRP from a political standpoint.
So this is probably the most fascinating movie that's playing out, because it ties into, you know, BRICS and the sanctions against Russia, China in particular. But you know, we the West, the NATO countries, if you will, we weaponized the old payment rails, the old messaging and payment settlement system, which was SWIFT. And there's only one way to destroy a thing like that, and that's to effectively opt out of it. You can't give it negative energy, because that just encourages it to continue. You give it positive energy, same thing. So the only way is to walk away from it. And that's what you got a lot of countries doing right now, is they're opting out. I think, and our theory has long been, as they're opting out, they're moving towards a sound money standard and a digital standard, right? So they're getting to go first. So much for America first, right? Because our political class doesn't believe in America first anymore. But Russia believes in Russia first. China believes in China first.
That's right.
And Saudi Arabia and the Middle East and Europe. I mean, so my prediction with respect to this issue is that we will continue to see these dominoes fall, where we move towards a multipolar world. And the rest of the world, we're going to wake up one day and the rest of the world's back on the gold standard, and we're holding a bunch of fiat. So the dollar will begin, it's already beginning, to hyperinflate as more dollars come back to the U.S., buying up real estate assets, buying up all kinds of stuff, actually buying energy assets, buying up car dealerships, any real asset that's cash flowing in the United States, land, it's ranches, farms, all this type of stuff. They're going to continue to buy up, and we're going to be willingly selling it to them, because we think we're getting a lot of money, because it's hundreds of millions or whatever, but really it's this fake fiat stuff that's just coming home to roost.
That's right.
And at some point we'll realize it. It seems like we're starting to realize it, like the Treasury is having trouble continuing to offload Treasury bonds, things like that. These things are going with no bids and things like that. So it does seem like the music is winding down, even though the show's still going on, the dancers are still moving. When this occurs, we will have to go back to the gold standard as well. And if I had to pick it, I mean, if you believe in this play and the presidential election stuff and all that, and you think, okay, maybe Trump ends up coming back, if that's what plays out here over the next several months and it gets super weird between now and then, I would bet that during his inauguration speech, he announces that we're going back to the gold standard. That will stabilize, effectively be catching the falling knife. It'll stabilize, we'll lock right in, and he'll make some comment about being on a level playing field.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Your views on BRICS, Ripple, and the Bank of International Settlements?
So kind of, you know, I think I threw out the macro theory just then, but so the interesting thing is what's going to happen to the central banks. Obviously, Ripple is very, they're working a lot with a lot of the central banks to do CBDCs. In the U.S., our political class is kind of debating whether or not they want a CBDC. A lot of people are concerned about the control with programmability and things like that. That if our cash was truly digital and the things that they could layer on to us, I've got a slightly more nuanced view of that, and it's like this: that maybe what would occur is that there are certain assets that are programs, call them your CBDCs, that would be issued in form of like, universal basic income, things like that.
Right.
And you actually do want to program that because you don't want it used for drugs or
Correct.
prostitution
Correct.
or things that you're giving the people money so that they can eat, they can have essential medicines, they can have a roof over their head. Right.
Gotcha.
So for like your basic needs, having a CBDC that's been programmed to only allow it to be spent in those basic needs manner for kind of that layer of humanity, kind of maybe a good idea. And then
Gotcha.
as you start to talk about your more country agnostic digital assets like XRP, XLM, some that people be willing to take peer to peer in any jurisdiction, they got a little more freedom about what you can spend it on.
Right.
Because it's not going to be programmed in those ways. And that could be, it kind of turns out to be this strata of different kind of networks that are kind of stacked on top of each other.
So you do see some good in CBDCs, but at the same time, but at the same aspect, recognizing some bads as well.
Right. And then the major bad is that, it's fiat, right? So it's the digital fiat. And so the real thing when you start to think about, BRICS, BIS, and XRP is humanity going to allow a fiat system much longer?
Right.
Or is humanity going to evolve and demand what's going to be an ABDC, an asset-backed digital currency system? Right. In which case it'll be more like country treasuries. This is a world, some call it like the Nasara, Jassara type world, where every country goes back to being a republic of the people. Governments are shrunk down to almost nothing, and they're using their own treasuries to issue, money based off of real assets they have in country, their gold holdings, their oil and gas, all these different things, of which every country is abundant in when it comes to all commodities. So that to me would be kind of nirvana, because I think it's an ascension of humanity, of the human spirit. All these forward wars and everything that we've lived with in our lifetime wouldn't be necessary anymore, because you're not trying to implement central banking systems.
Right.
So maybe we're kind of on a path to where that's the ultimate end game, that we all get to decide, kind of a choose your own adventure type of thing.
Correct.
And CBDCs are a step on that path.
Gotcha. I love it. I love it. I before we get to our final question here, I want to ask everyone to do us a huge favor and go to our Crypto4Life page. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the amazing content and interviews that we have, just like Jimmy Valle. I appreciate him in a major way. So Jimmy, one of my final questions here, and I've had a couple things as far as your thoughts from a political perspective with the SEC, but I guess you can tie that into where do you see this thing coming to an end? Not so much with the space, because I think they got a lot more stuff they're going to be doing, especially we just see in the very beginning of this ETHGate security deal. But where do you see the end point, and what is it going to take, in your personal opinion, SEC versus Ripple? Are they just looking for some money now? I mean, what do you think they're doing, and how much longer you think, just from your opinion, how long this could still take, regarding the SEC versus Ripple particularly?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was probably, and I regret this now, but in 2021, I did an open forum session where I basically answered every question, and I got asked that question in December of 2021. In fact, it was pretty close to New Year's. And, I was like, well, you could see this going into the appellate level court. We didn't have a summary judgment then, so a lot of these issues weren't defined yet. Could see it going, ultimately the Supreme Court. And if that happens, it's a 2026, 2027 type time frame. There is a timeline, let's say that, where that could happen, because both parties are equally unhappy with the way summary judgment turned out. Ripple might want to appeal the institutional sales, and I got a comment about that I want to come back to.
Okay.
And then The other issues, I think the SEC is not happy with the way the other distributions and the programmatic sales occur. So those were the three buckets that the SEC created, right? On the institutional sale, so if I had my druthers, it's like how much more embarrassment and destruction of the SEC as an institution are the commissioners and the politicians willing to allow to occur? I think if they actually take this all the way to Supreme Court, it's hard to imagine the SEC ever being thought of again as a prudential regulator. I mean, it's basically the corruption and all the things that have been exposed. Now you're just talking more time for more of this stuff to come out. It's going to continue to come out. So I'd really like to see like big kids and cooler heads prevail and get in a room and strike a settlement.
Right.
Maybe they get paid. And this ties into, at the penalty phase, ties into the comment I want to make about institutional sales. So a private transaction in securities to an institution is the definition of a private placement.
Right.
Private placements under Section 4 of the securities laws are exempt from registration, right? Okay. So even assuming, that Ripple did everything the SEC assuming they did about this incident, the judge has in fact ruled that, that those were securities transactions.
Correct.
All that really would, we're talking about a foot fault violation because they just sold to accredited investors, effectively,
right?
Institutional investors.
Right.
So they should have to file a Form D and perfect the private placement. They should have to pay a nominal fine, and we should move on with our lives. I agree. And I think Ethereum should go through this, should do the exact same thing. I'm not looking for Ethereum, the digital asset, the network itself, to have to go through this shit show that all of us have had to endure for the past 4 years.
That's right.
Say it was a security, it was clearly a securities offering at the ICO. That's why Bill Hinman put it aside when he had the speech. But that's fine. Let's make them, pay a fine, file a Form D, and then let's let the markets decide which one of these are going to be the most useful.
Do you think in some weird way, in some just ironically weird way, that if they approach the Ethereum, the SEC versus Ethereum as a security, do you think it could be advantageous for XRP, meaning that if that could be quickly resolved, or if that, because you even had Brad Garlinghouse that says he doesn't think the SEC will be victorious against Ethereum, and it kind of blew me away a little bit when he made that comment. But I had to really think about what he was saying in his entirety. And do you feel like some of these things will get resolved because maybe the courts or somehow the legal system jumps in and says enough is enough because of the embarrassment that the SEC is causing our judicial, our with the lying and the corruption and all the things that they're finding, blatantly lying and also misleading the court. At some point, Jimmy, you're as a law background, where does the legal system say, okay, enough is enough? We've seen it in so many other things. If you lie, they jump in, but why aren't we seeing that? And will that somehow play a part in getting this thing resolved quickly? Because I don't know if we're talking about money now, or we're talking about justice. What are we truth? What are we talking about?
Yeah. So you're starting to see the judicial system say enough is enough to the extent they can. They've just sanctioned the SEC in the debt box case, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's on the history of what was it? Unfaithful allegiance to the law that they were saying in connection with the Ripple case. There was the other case where they basically got really spanked as New York case. And then you've got debt box where now they've been sanctioned. That's about as far as the judicial system can do. The judicial system can't make up law from the bench, right? Gotcha. We live in a system that's in the legislator's hands. So one way you could see this coming to an end is that there are some things that are going to begin surfacing, and I think they're starting to happen, which are so embarrassing to really the Democrat Party that it threatens the reelection of someone like a Senator Warren and Joe Biden, right? You basically have an industry, and a lot of industry now, including industry that had backed, pretty much all the major financial players had been very supportive of the Democratic Party,
Right.
because it's like, let us keep looting the system.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but they almost single-handedly taken, somewhere like San Francisco or Silicon Valley, which was once revered as one of the most innovative places, in the world, and embarrassingly had companies leaving, and I think we're somehow the Democratic Party, I hate to say this, but has embarrassed America in many senses around the world.
Yep, I concur with that. But if it actually threatens their election chances,
right?
And this John Deaton's challenge is really kind of bringing this front and center.
And brilliant that he decided to go to Republic. I mean, I think it's somebody's talking to him in the right way for sure.
Yeah. I want to see things change so dramatically in such a different way. Like for me, that kind of Nirvana case of going back to being republics and getting rid of the central bank and stuff like that is what's best for humanity.
That's right.
And so in our current system, just because of lobbying dollars and what it takes financially to run for something like Senate, right? We're talking tens of millions of dollars,
right?
Maybe more. It's so rotten throughout the system that I just think we need bigger change in this country that I don't know that we can get out of the current way that things are structured. So even if this is kind of the 2024 thing, and then 2020 or next will be 2026, I guess there would be kind of the interim next elections. So this may occur over 3 election cycles or something like that, and that'll just be horrible to live through. I think if we have to actually grind it out that long, we'll live through it. I think where we're headed, though, in the markets, in the business markets, is that this stuff's taken off.
Yeah.
When you've got your BlackRocks and your other institutions, it's certainly it's woken a lot of the people up in the various industries that we participate in.
Correct.
And we're starting to have a lot of great deal flow because of what's happening, and we're talking really good deals.
Right.
So maybe that's what ends up kind of coming in and you serve as just free market capitalism, which just can't be restrained.
That's right.
Very long, because money has to go get to work. Maybe that ends up just kind of taking over and driving crypto and digital assets forward, and then the regulators have to kind of fall in line, or you're proving your uselessness.
Yeah, I agree with you. 1,300 people, almost 1,300 right now watching live. Jimmy, I want to thank you so much. What's your final thoughts as you're getting a lot of support? A lot of people are excited. A lot of people love who you are and what you stand for. What do you say to the 1,300 people? Your final thoughts as we get ready to get out of here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate you having me on. I've enjoyed the conversation. I am incredibly optimistic about our future as an industry, and the things that we're going to do. I look at this from a very high level, kind of the macro level, almost all the time, and think that we're basically taking the baton from the baby boom and we're handing it off to the millennials, and it's critically important that in that process we change whatever we don't like about the character and the nature, about the way people have done things in the past.
Correct.
And make a better impression for our children and grandchildren, because it's getting tokenized. It's getting our character and our character traits are being put on the blockchain forever. If we encode it with corruption now, they'll be dealing with it 1,000 years from now. So let's everyone do your part to try to make sure that the baton you're handing off, in whatever little way or big way you're doing it, somehow does it to benefit humanity. And I think we'll be in great shape.
Absolutely. Guys, make sure you follow my friend Jimmy and all that he's doing. Shouts out to Jimmy. Shouts out to Valhil Capital and all that these guys are doing. Also, thank you guys. I saw BullRun Out say that this is the best interview we've had. Thank you guys so much for your amazing support and for all the love and support you're showing for Jimmy as well. Guys, make sure you guys tune in next Thursday. or I'm sorry, this Thursday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we have Molly Elmore on. We also will be following that Friday with Ladies Night. It's going to be absolutely incredible. We got some brilliant minds from a female perspective that will be on that show. It will be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we'll see you guys mañana right on schedule at 12 p.m. Jimmy, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you for being on the show. The Crypto4Life family, all you guys that are out there, thank you so much. God bless you guys, and we'll see you guys again soon. Until next time, it's your boy James, a.k.a. 68J. Peace.